I think there are benefits to some degree. I think one of them is, for many delegates, the efficiency of it, not having to travel, not having to find somewhere to park. There's the timekeeping aspect, I suppose, is actually, from a presenter point of view, it is easier to keep a track on the time when you're doing online to when you're actually in a room. Because I think the questions are easier to manage, bringing people back from breakout rooms. It happens very suddenly online.
And it's very quick.
It's a quick thing. So yeah, I think from that point of view, sort of efficiency of time, there are great benefits. And I think sometimes for some of the shorter courses, you can more realistically put on just a 1 hour thing. Now you couldn't do that in a room because you wouldn't want to, bring people out to travel to just sit for an hour. Sure. But you can do that on Zoom or Teams or whatever.
Yeah, that's true.
So, yeah.
And I think from our point of view, I think it's similar kind of themes really. And the fact you can have people internationally kind of coming in. We've had people dropping in from Australia, New Zealand, and South America. In fact, Greece asked us to work with their parents online, so we were able to do that. So I mean, you wouldn't normally have been able to do that. So that was quite interesting as well.
Yeah.
And as you say, the speed of getting people from the breakout rooms, rapidly putting them in, bringing them back super quick, that's good. The chat function as well I found quite useful, that people can kind of spray out a load of ideas really, really quickly.
Yes.
The kind of rhetoric question you might ask a group that maybe you get 1 or 2 confident voices coming through, you get a much wider spread of answers coming through on the chat. People don't mind chatting. And they can even throw in live links, can't they? On the responses, they can sort of say, and that resource is found on this website, and they'll give you the full detailed resource on it. So that's kind of cool.
And you don't get the kind of sidebar conversation that you might do in a room. People will put something they're doing or a resource or a document in the chat bar and say, this is something I'm doing or something I've used. And it's thrown out there to everybody, so it's not just the couple of people that are sat on their table who get the benefit of that.
Exactly.
Everybody.
And of course, there's the mute button.
Yes, there is the mute button.
In the real world, we haven't got a mute button, but we don't have to think about that in the same way.
Yeah, you have to be careful how you use that.
Indeed.
I have used it when I've heard people's dogs in the background.
Dogs screaming babies, other children, or the person turning and shouting at somebody. All those things happen.
But yeah, there are advantages to it, and I think there's albeit a smaller percentage, but I think there is a small percentage of the population that actually, for the longer term, would like to carry on.
I think you're right.
I think there are a lot of people who are desperate to get back into rooms and train in a traditional way.
But there are some people, as you say, who will hang on to this. Absolutely.
I think there's definitely something to hold on to with what we've got. Yeah.
I think the face-to-face, you can see people for starters, and that's the big thing. That's the big striking thing, and you can feel the atmosphere. And I think as trainers, like we both are, you get very used to. You kind of feel the atmosphere, but you're constantly scanning groups, and you're forever noticing who's stopped engaging or who's engaging. You're trying to work with if anybody's dominating or not dominating, and that is so much harder online. You just don't get that feeling in the same way. So the feel of the room, the work with the room, the dynamic of the room, so important in the face-to-face world. Especially work that kind of works around inclusion. You kind of want that feel stuff. Much harder online.
I think that for me, it's the relationships that you don't get to sustain with people online. And I'm in the fortunate position of having built relationships with a lot of schools and Senkos and heads over the years. But even then, there's almost, it does feel like there's a bit of a barrier to having a right good chat online, over a brew kind of thing, as they come in the morning and that sort of atmosphere for it. But yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, there are some advantages as well, I suppose it's a horses for courses thing. But I think certainly relationships are a lot harder to sustain in an online setting.
Sure.
And I think people are not as quick to come forward with questions and contributions as they are in a face-to-face scenario.
True. Well, the sort of things we've found have worked well is using the breakout rooms a lot. So breaking down to 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, and then bringing them back, and then maybe going through the groups one at a time, maybe asking each group to kind of feed something back. Using the chat function I was using earlier on, that's a nice way you can just quickly get people to do it. And I've also found direct questions, asking somebody directly, what do you think about this, Rachel? You know, you can directly ask people, because you've got the names, you know exactly who's in the room with you. I mean, sometimes there's a long silence, the deadly Zoom silence of somebody, they've actually gone off to get a cup of tea, and you've asked them the direct question, because you have no way of knowing if the video's off. But that's, I think so, that's that. And also the use of the graphic online we found as well, the visual. So people are giving ideas and they can see their idea appearing on the screen. That keeps people with you, so there's an interactivity in that sense. That's worked for us for participation. How about you, Zena?
Yeah, a lot of that, and as well, I think following the chat bar thing, quite often I will be reading through the comments in the chat bar and I'll just pick one out that I just think is interesting, but I'd just love to know a bit more, and so you can sort of say, oh, Rachel, could you just unmute and tell us more about that?
Yes.
And then that person can
bring
expand,
their voice in.
I've also used collaborative tools, which is more successful with the Teams than the Zoom, but you can put a document in, you can upload a document, and everyone can type into it at the same time. And it will organise the text for you, so you're not typing over the top of somebody else's work. So it means that you can have any number of people contributing to this one question in the middle with a kind of spider diagram around the edge, and that's really really interesting, really powerful. And of course I can comment over the top as things appear, like magic, you know, as they appear. But I think it's interesting what you said about the names, because I find, I don't know, this might be a personal thing, but I find it easier to remember people's names online than I do when they're in a room. And I've learnt the names of so many people over this past year or so because I've been seeing them on the screen, and whereas when I see them with their badges on, the badges are sometimes harder to read and that kind of thing, but you've just got this nice kind of sort of a screen of faces with the name on attached. So.
And the only other thing I was going to mention was I've taken to encourage when we're online to getting people to read off the slides. If we are using slides, I'll ask early doors to get a couple of readers, and they read if there's any text on the screen, and I found that's quite interesting as well. And also when the chat's coming up, I'll ask the readers to read off the chat. So that little extra bit of participation for two members of the group, that seems to have helped as well. So bringing other voices in.